Good evening. Tonight we return to Victorian England, to a cramped lodging house in Westminster, and to a crime that shocked London in the winter of 1845. A woman, a marriage, a death behind closed doors. Her name was Martha Browning. She was accused of murdering her husband, not in a public street, not in a moment of open violence, but quietly inside the room they shared. The courts would later say she strangled him with a thick cord. But nearly 2 centuries later, questions still remain. This is not just the story of a murder. It is the story of suspicion, circumstance, and a justice system operating in the shadows of Victorian fear. Tonight, we investigate the case of Martha Browning. To understand this case, we must first understand the world in which it unfolded. England, 1845. London was a city of sharp contrasts. Grand buildings stood only streets away from overcrowded lodgings. Wealth and poverty lived side by side. For the working poor, privacy was rare and survival was uncertain. Marriage was often less about romance and more about necessity. Women, particularly working-class women, had few legal rights. They could not easily leave marriages. They had limited access to income. And in the eyes of the law, they were often presumed morally weaker than men. It was in this environment that Martha Browning lived with her husband in lodgings in Westminster. Little would have drawn attention to them until one night when a man was found dead. Records describe Martha Browning as an ordinary Englishwoman, not wealthy, not influential, and not previously known to the authorities. She was a wife, a lodger, a woman largely invisible to history until her name appeared in court documents. There are no surviving personal letters, no diary entries, no voice left behind to explain her thoughts or fears. Everything we know about Martha Browning comes from witnesses, from officials, and from a trial that would seal her fate. What kind of marriage did she have? Was it violent? Was it strained? Or was it simply another difficult Victorian union crushed by poverty? The records are silent, and that silence would later become significant. Sometime in 1845, inside their Westminster lodgings, Martha Browning's husband died. There was no sign of forced entry, no public struggle, no immediate outcry. When authorities examined the body, they concluded that the cause of death was strangulation, a thick cord applied with enough force to end a life. The implication was clear. This was not an accident. This was not illness. And according to prosecutors, this was not the act of a stranger. Suspicion fell quickly and heavily on the person closest to him, his wife. But crucial questions lingered even then. Who first discovered the body? Were there witnesses to any argument? Was the cord ever clearly identified? The historical record provides answers, but not certainty. Victorian criminal investigations were swift and often incomplete by modern standards. Once suspicion settled on Martha Browning, the machinery of justice moved quickly. There was little room for alternative theories, no deep forensic analysis, no psychological profiling. Investigators focused on motive. Why would a wife kill her husband? Was there jealousy, anger, desperation? Or was it simply assumed that a woman capable of such a crime must have had a hidden moral failing? In the 19th century, female defendants were often judged not only for the crime itself, but for how well they fit society's idea of what a woman should be. Martha Browning, silent and poor, fit none of the expectations that might have protected her. On December 15, 1845, Martha Browning stood trial at the Old Bailey. The charge, murder. The courtroom would have been crowded, public executions were still common, and trials like this drew attention. The prosecution argued that Martha Browning had strangled her husband with a cord inside their lodgings. Evidence was presented, witnesses spoke, but by modern standards, the case was thin. There was no confession on record, no eyewitness to the act itself, and little documentation of motive. Yet the jury did not deliberate for long. Martha Browning was found guilty. The sentence was automatic, death. Victorian newspapers reported the verdict with a mix of fascination and moral judgment. A woman who killed her husband violated one of society's deepest expectations. Female murderers were treated as anomalies, dangerous, unnatural, and worthy of severe punishment. There was little public sympathy. Few questioned whether the trial had been fair. To many readers at the time, the case was already closed. Justice, they believed, had been served, but history would not be so certain. In 1846, Martha Browning was taken to Newgate Prison. There, she was executed by hanging. Her death was notable. Female executions had become increasingly rare, and many had not witnessed one in decades. No final statement from Martha Browning survives, no recorded confession, no last-minute revelation. She died as she lived, largely unheard. With her execution, the case officially ended. But questions did not. So what really happened inside that Westminster lodging? Did Martha Browning kill her husband? Was the evidence sufficient? Or was she convicted because the system required a culprit more than it required certainty? Was there domestic violence behind the scenes? Was there an argument that escalated? Or was there someone else whose presence history chose to forget? Victorian justice did not always seek truth. It sought resolution. And once Martha Browning was hanged, there was no reason to look further. Tonight, her case remains a reminder that history is written by courts and gallows, not always by facts. Some crimes fade, some verdicts endure, and some stories, like that of Martha Browning, remain forever suspended between guilt and doubt. Good evening.